Hello everyone, welcome to the Weeb initiative. I'm your host, the Weeb. This is the show where every other week I'll be talking about anime, manga, and everything in between. This week I'll be talking about diverging a bit from this season's theme of anime basics and the things I watched when I first started the hobby. This time I'll be talking about recent manga I've read. Although I recently got to know it. This is pretty old, and in its own right, it is pretty famous. Lone Wolf Cub. I don't actually remember the Japanese name, but that's not here nor there. So let's get started. Before I even start, disclaimer, spoiler alert, although I will not spoil so much because this is one of those manga that is not really spoilable, let's say. It would take too much to me to spoil anything really big, and even then the final the ending is kind of played out as you read it, so that doesn't, it's not applicable here. So let's get it started. First off, the stats. So Lone Wolf Cub was originally written in 1970. It was written by Kazuo Koike and illustrated by Goseki Kojima. Just before I even start, 1970. So this is basically a really old manga at this point. It has 53 years of age, and it is considered by many the first off the most famous manga in nowadays. Historically the most famous manga, one of the most published and reissued mangas ever, and also this is a point that I will get into more later, the most accurate representation of feudal Japan, historically speaking, right? So the story represents and actually presents a situation, environment of the feudal Japan, and it is considered one of the most accurate to be ever done in manga or other mediums. The original serialization of the series was done from September 1970 to April 1976. It has 28 volumes, and just to get this out there, it is a thick manga. Most of the chapters have around 60 pages, from 58 to 62, but there are special kind of turning points, let's say, but not really. Some stories are way longer than others. There was one specific that went for 120 pages and another for 111, I think, and they range from 60 to God knows where. And the thing is, right, this is a really thick manga. So basically that's the stats, right? So it has 28 volumes, 60 pages. It has 142 chapters. And now for the story and a bit of the let's say the going around of this manga. So this manga is considered one of the, let's say, masterpieces of the 20th century, because it is one of the last, let's say, epics actually done. The writer Kazuo Koike, he has renown around not only manga but Japanese written media in general, and same thing for the illustrator Goseki Kojima. But what I want to focus here is basically the story, right? So not to get too much into people's lives, but I want to focus on the manga itself. So first off, what's the story about, right? So Lone Wolf Cub is the story and none of it is claimed to be factual, so it didn't really happen this way, but the construction of the environment and the world setting and all the things that happen, let's say, around the main characters is historically accurate. So many of the situations that will find themselves in the story, and for the most part, are historically accurate for feudal Japan. So the story is about this man named Ogami Ito, and his son Ogami Daigoro. Ogami Ito is a guy in his... It's never really clear, but he's in his 40s or 50s, something in the range of that. And Daigoro starts the manga 3 years of age, so he's a really little kid. And the manga basically revolves around it is an epic about Ogami Ito and Daigoro venturing forth in their quest for vengeance. So this setting is really explained at the start, so it is not really a spoiler, but let's just start from the beginning. So in feudal Japan, according to the manga, there were 3 pillars under the shogun. So the shogun is this figure, the emperor, let's say, and the way they portray it in the manga is, I will assume it's historically accurate. So the shogun is basically the god emperor of the whole Japan empire, and from this point on, he's strictly speaking almost divinity, and so everyone has to bow before the shogun, and his crest is the one to be on top of everything, and symbolically speaking, he's the most important person and entity in the whole life of any Japanese person at the time. The thing is, the shogun has 3 pillars as the chief of government. He has the Kurokawa ninjas, who are the eyes and ears of the shogun, so they go to the 60 states of Japan at the time and report on schemes against the shogun and whatever, because at this time the shogunate basically had this, not mentality, but this notion to not only dominate but subjugate anything under them. So you either went with them or you were dead, to be really clear. And basically the Kurokawa were the eyes and ears of the shogun. The other pillar was the Yagyu assassins, that were the enforcers of the shogun for the most part. So not like the police force, but let's say not only the army, but the personal enforcers of the shogun, more or less. The not royal guard, but let's say a military force under the shogun directly, outside from the military and the police and whatever. And then there was the figure of the executioner of the shogun. So for the most part, whenever a scheme, traitor, whatever against the shogun was discovered, the shogun would, to preserve the honor of both the person and the shogun itself, let's say deliberately ask the person to surrender themselves, and most often it would lead them to commit seppuku. That was the honored way to end yourself, let's say. And one of the parts of seppuku is that that is 2 movements in seppuku for the most part. There's first the opening of the belly by the person who's gonna, end themselves, and then there's the cutting of the head. The cutting of the head, it's done by the executioner of the shogun. That is one of the most important positions for a single person in the shogunate, because the executioner is the only person outside of the shogun that can wear the crest of the shogun, the holy hawk crest. And that is to mean that the shogun himself is ending the person being executed. And that there is this whole symbolic thing that they explain. I will not do the better work than them in the manga, but just to say, being an executioner is the highest you can be under the shogun. Let's just say that. And the thing is, right, Ogami Ito was the executioner. Just a quick side note, this is kind of important actually. For the version I read that is available on Amazon, I chose to use the original cover of the first volume to be the thumbnail for this episode. It is an official translation made by professional translators and whatever. It is available on Kindle, I think, and obviously in Amazon. It is a reissue from, I don't remember the year, but the thing is, right, they use a lot, and I mean a lot, of Japanese phrases, words, and idioms and whatever. The thing is, right, so you will need to get used to these expressions if you want to read this. Eventually, you come across so much of the same expressions that you get what is going on. So, daimyo, goyo, and a whole lot of other things. You'll see a lot, and what I'm saying about the assassins, the ninjas, the executioner is one of the phrases they use that I don't actually remember because it's a long ass word and I will butcher it anyways. But this is the idea. So back to the story. So Ogami Ito was at one point the executioner of the emperor, so he was on the top of the world more or less. For some reason, at some point, the Yagyu family, the ones that were the assassins, schemed against Ogami Ito to frame him as a traitor to the shogun. And basically, Ogami Ito was banished, more or less, from Edo, which at the time was the capital of Japan. And his wife died. His clan was basically disbanded, and he lost everything, basically. So from a samurai, and he was a samurai, first and foremost. So he, being a samurai, he lost everything. He lost his honor, his family, his name, and everything else. The Yagyu schemed, so it's not discovered by the shogun at the time, and the story kicks off basically from that. So Ogami Ito knows that the Yagyu schemed against him. He wants revenge because he lost everything, and because his honor is basically hurt. And at this point, the story basically opens up with this epic of the quest for Ito and Daigoro, his son, his newborn son at that point when his clan is disbanded. His quest for revenge against the Yagyu. It's basically that. But the story, it actually doesn't revolve much around the quest itself, because from that point on, Ogami Ito chooses to become a hired assassin, and names himself Lone Wolf and Cub, meaning he as a lone wolf that has no home, no family, no everything, and his cub, his son, Daigoro. And basically, most of the time, all the stories will be about he killing someone for money. Most of the time. And as an epic, we don't actually get to know him very much at the beginning, because he, as a hero of an epic, much like the Odyssey, much like the Iliad, he's the hero. He's the uncontested hero, more or less. And the thing is, right, one of the really outstanding things about the manga itself is that you don't actually get to know Ogami Ito because he talks a lot he does, but not on his own things. You don't actually get to know Ito by what he tells people to do or whatever. You get to see his actions and his not only resolve but his philosophy in life. So one of the things that happens a lot in the manga is not only the mention, but actually the presence, the overwhelming appearance of Buddhism. Buddhism is one of the, let's say, the cornerstones of not only this story in general, but feudal Japan in general. Ogami Ito is the, let's say, the example, the best example, the gold standard of the Buddhist. He meditates, he finds, searches for enlightenment and inner peace. And one of the many points in the start of the manga is his search for the way of the assassin. So there's a lot of things that happen in the manga that I need to tell you about. But let's get started from the beginning. So the manga starts, and it's basically the villain of the week, more or less. So the first stories are basically someone goes to Ogami Ito, tells the tale of what is the problem. So it is either corruption, revenge, and whatever. He has two conditions to accept contract. 500 ryu, that there are 500 gold pieces. I don't actually know the value of that, but it is pure gold from everything I can research. And he wants to be told the reason why the person contract him wants wants someone killed. And from this point on, we get this whole world building about the different states of Japan, the different situations people live in, and all these other things that happen that is really interesting, actually. In this first part, you already get to see that as an epic about people, the focus in general of the manga is on the people they meet, not really on the journey or the end of it, but the people that they meet along the way, the situations that they live or they see being lived are the really the nice focus point of the manga. That being said, so the first, I don't actually remember how many volumes. They basically are different contracts that they pick up, and we get to see already some of the historical influences. They present a lot of the historical, not references, but the historical landmarks or traditions and so on and so forth. One of the cases that I can remember right now is one of the not states, but one of the let's say districts of one of the states in feudal Japan had this thing where the river in the middle of the district was so turbulent that no bridge at the time could hold it up. So they had to appoint people to basically carry other people around to cross the river. And there's this whole let's say this whole sub-community of this class of people that basically do transport work for other people to cross rivers. And then there's a whole lot of culture, not cultural influence, but there's a lot of subculture, some really things that just, there are things that actually existed, right? So, and it's really interesting to see this being shown in a manga as a historical register or something. I don't know if I'm making sense anymore, but that's basically you get to see a lot of how feudal Japan was a thing, how some things existed that you can only imagine, right? But basically, at the start, random killings, until one point that Ogami Ito gets a contract to kill a guy that claims that he is the next Buddha. And that's when we have the first, let's say, breaking point, the first cornerstone of the manga, when Ogamito actually embraces the assassin way. Before I even start to say what's assassin way in the context of this manga, so he tries to kill the guy for once, and when he goes to do it, the guy just death stares him out of doing it, and he claims that you cannot kill me until you have found the emptiness of Mu. That is a Buddhist term of the I don't actually know. I'm not a Buddhist, so I don't claim to be right on this, but it's a concept of not near enlightenment, but it is a condition to be one with nothingness. And at this point, what Ito does is basically go back to a temple and meditate for, I think they say it's 3 days straight, more or less. And after these 3 days of heavy meditation, he finally becomes one with nothing and kills the guy. And from this point on, we see it's a slight change, but it is a noticeable one, that Ogamito abandons the way of the warrior, or the bushi, or the way of the samurai, and embraces the way of the assassin. And I think I say the way of the assassin, way of the samurai, and whatever. And I can't actually explain this well enough as they do in the manga, but to be simple, the way of the warrior, the way of the samurai, is a philosophical, let's say, way of thinking, mindset that has some preconcept ways of doing stuff. So, for one, the warrior is always he's tied to his duty to protect something or someone, and he has always to do it honorably and in a way to not lose face, not to themselves or to the protector. So if you are a samurai and you are a retainer for a lord, you cannot do anything to lose face to either your lord or yourself, because otherwise you lose your status as a warrior. So this translates more or less to any killing that you gotta do, you have to make a formal duel, you cannot ambush people, you cannot attack people that are unarmed, you have to basically you have to fight cleanly without tricks and without concealing weapons and whatever. And there are a whole lot of examples of things that warriors can't do. And the way of the assassin is not actually explained what it is in the manga, but it is basically you can do whatever and fuck it. And this comes on because one of the cornerstones of the manga, mainly in this part where Ogamito abandons the way of the warrior and becomes really an assassin by trade and enters the way of the assassin, he is questioned multiple times by different people, being that he is a ronin, that is a samurai without a master, without the lord to protect, without someone to protect. They think that he's a warrior, but actually he's an assassin. So they expect him to act a certain way with certain preconcepts and in certain manners do so always challenge people lawfully, always choose to duel, and some parts are also always defend your honor before your own life and whatever. And multiple times he subverts expectations and does none of it. And multiple times this goes on, and he always exclaims that he's in the way of the assassin, so he does not belong in the human or the warrior realm anymore. I'm using so many abstract concepts right now. I don't think I am making much sense to anyone. The thing is, before I even go any further, go read the manga. It is pretty good. It is long as hell, but it is pretty good. Back to it. So this is the first cornerstone, and let's say the journey into the way of the assassin. This is the first cornerstone. The second cornerstone happens way later when we get to meet the, I think it's the gunsmiths of Sakai. And to me, at the very least, this is another cornerstone, but that's debatable, I would say. The thing is, so at some point after entering this way of the assassin, and the story kind of not really, the story never really progresses much. Is to this point. The story starts to progress really after this point towards the next cornerstone that basically predicts the end of the manga. But anyways, before I get to that, so the second cornerstone is basically this. For the most part, Ogamito and Dagoro, they travel on foot, and Dagoro is always on his wooden cart. It is a custom cart that Ito has not really modeled, but he has fitted with hidden weapons. I don't actually know the names of the weapons, but it is basically 2 bamboo sticks that can be basically locked together to be a quarterstaff, and at the seams they conceal hidden blades. I don't know the name of the weapon, but that's basically it. The thing is, Daigoro has this card for the most part of the whole manga. The card's the same basically. It does get destroyed at some point, but that's not really important. The thing is, the one thing that the card has is that the bottom plate is a iron plate. It comes up more often than not, but to deflect projectiles for the most part. But it is something like the surprise factor, let's say, for the majority of the encounters. At this point in what I was saying about the gunsmiths of Sakai, at some point someone contracts Ito to kill one of the gunsmiths of Sakai. The gunsmiths of Sakai were, and again, this is a historical reference. I cannot explain it this well enough, but the gunsmiths of Sakai were 3 shops, let's say, 3 people that built shops to build weapons for the shogun and the shogun, the army, more or less. At that point, after the introduction of gunpowder guns, of the black powder guns, through the Portuguese in Japan in the 1500s, the gunsmiths of Sakai were basically this institution, more or less, let's say, really loosely saying this. They basically were the institution that was named by the shogun to produce guns. They would produce around 90 guns a year, according to the manga, I think. And basically they were the only ones that could do it. So there's this one guy from one of the major engineers inside the gunsmiths of Sakai that apparently is smuggling guns for separatists or something like that. And so they want them killed. And Ogamito, at that point, he goes there, he confronts the guy, and the guy just says, yo, they just want to kill me because I reinvented this repeating rifle, or I think it's 9-shot rifle at the same time. So it is basically a musket that fire 9 bullets at a time. So it has, like, it's a musket, but it has 9 barrels that can be all lit up in one go. That being said, the guy eventually, Ogamito eventually hears the guy out and listens to his obstination as a gunsmith, because the guy as himself, he has his notion of the way of the gunsmith, the way that his trade is to be done. So he believes that the thing about being a gunsmith is to be efficient. How much can a gun do, and how can I get the gun to do more? And then he has this whole thing about being frustrated with the fact that the gunsmiths of Sakai basically they do not evolve anymore as gunsmiths. They just embellish guns with golden laces and jewelry and whatever to present people, but they don't actually make better guns. They just make guns for luxury ends, and not really they don't make guns to be guns. And it is this thing where you see the obstination of the person, the wish. You can see that even though it is a guy that you met for once and probably will never see again, at this point you never see him again because he ends up dying later. The guy had this, I don't know, this discipline, this I don't know the words. He just had this way of thinking that it is for the betterment of his class, of his style, of his trade and whatever. And it is awesome at this point that the guy really thought it out, right? So the bare basics and going back to the concept of why he wanted to improve on his trade and what his trade was about. And so more or less, the things roll out and whatever. But the last wish that he had is to Ito to install his 90 pellet gun, 90 ball gun, whatever. I don't actually remember if they are 90 balls or 27. That is not important here. He installs him in his cart and uses it to volley a horde of people. So Ito installs this and a tinderbox under the main carriage of Daigoro, and they go on from there. So this 9-shot cannon, 27-shot cannon is eventually used. It's used more than once for the duration of the arc, more or less, until one point that they actually lose the cart. And I don't think they lose the cart. The compartment is used but for the next thing that happens, that basically predicts the end of the manga. So after the Gunsmiths of Sakai, the Ogamito takes on a whole lot of the other contracts and whatever, and there's this whole thing where at this one point he gets this he commandeers more or less official mail from the shogunate. So there are these express letter from the shogun to governors of the states and whatever that are really important, and there were people indicated to carry them and to deliver them. At one point, Ito kills one of these guys because he was contracted to, and gets possession of this letter. And then we get to see that the Yagyu apparently were using the letters to basically control the parts of the shogunate under the shogun's nose. And so basically there is this whole conspiracy that the Yagyu actually are controlling the whole country under the shogun's notice, and basically this is a major act of treason. And so I will find the mystery about this letter. Why? Because it has a hidden message of sorts, and expose the guy and get my revenge. And so this basically is the start of the end of the manga. And from this point on, I don't actually need to talk about this story anymore. So basically that's the story I want to tell. Now, for the most part, the review, let's say. This manga is really hard to read, and you have to have the right mindset to it. It is not a manga that and I say this knowing that someone will disagree with me. I'm pretty certain. This manga is not for everyone. It is really hard to read, and you need to be on the right mindset, the right wavelength to get it, because you need to understand and keep in mind that this was written in the 70s, and this represents a time where honor and faith and pride and everything else were way more important than things that we have nowadays. Most times, these manga will, pragmatically speaking, I just butchered that, objectively speaking, this is not to be analyzed with modern values. We do not live like that anymore. No one lives like that anymore. And because you will see some really heavy things here. There are not a lot, but there are some conflicts that are just unimaginable for nowadays. So there is this one, let's say this one part that some retainers from a lord will contract Ogami Ito to kill the lord's child, so state secret is not revealed, and they know that it is treason what they are doing. They are hiring an assassin to kill their own lord, the person that they are meant to protect. And this is high treason. But at the same time, if they don't do it, the people in their domain will suffer, and so they chose the worst path possible, where everyone dies. So Ogami eventually goes there, kills the child, and then when he goes back, he finds that every one of the retainers committed seppuku, knowing what they did. And it is something that you cannot grasp with modern values. It is not easy. It is not comfortable to think about it. And you would just think, well, you can talk it out. No, it's not like that. It is not like that. Things do not work like that. And following the point, right, when I'm talking about kids dying, people committing seppuku, and this one thing, this story is heavy. Not heavy like I said about Ganex Clover or Murcielago or Trash. No, this story is heavy because it's an adult story. It talks about not only personal values, but also it talks about a whole lot of things that honor and desire, personal desires, personal goals, and the greater good at some point. And a lot of things that happen being a feudal Japan portrait, and I need to talk about this because it is important. How they treat women in general is atrocious in nowadays views. I think in the 70s it was still atrocious, but the thing is, it is atrocious. The treatment of women, the treatment of kids, the treatment of people in general. If you're the peasants that existed in feudal Japan, how they are treated, how a whole lot of things. It is not only, it's not social commentary, but it is something that happened, something that actually realistically happened. It is shown through a manga, but it is real. It's something that did happen, and they do not shy away from showing it. So, and oh, God bless the bots. I will get demonetized if I ever get monetization in this thing. I will get demonetized for this. You got everything from child labor, murder. I think the unconsensual intercourse, multiple instances of unconsensual intercourse. I mean, the list goes on. The things that happen in this manga are really terrible, and it is a really heavy manga. At one point, the amount of times that people commit seppuku in this story is so many. I actually became numb at it. At some point, the concept of seppuku was just, yeah, this guy is gonna end himself, and I was right, and it is really heavy at this point. Just also content warning. It does have boobies. It does not have the vag, but it does have boobies. If you ever get annoyed by that, and also to continue my point, the treatment of women is terrible, but you will find female characters that are really strong. They actually some of the chapters about women characters are the best ones in the. And I'm not saying this to cover myself up, but I'm very serious here. Some of the women characters that appear, they are just really strong, really nice representations. Not only fighting, but they have their own quests. as I already said, most of the manga is not about really the quest for vengeance or the vengeance itself, but it is about the people they meet, and the people they meet are the most diverse type of people ever. So for one, you eventually find a girl trying to run away from a bordel. You will find the one guy that is a thief but actually just wants revenge. You'll find someone that wants a prisoner to pay because they will not actually get the death penalty, but they want revenge from the guy, and so on and so forth. The cast of characters is so strong, so diverse. It is really, really interesting in this point. And that's basically it. Again, the story is pretty heavy, but it is really interesting to read. Now about the art, and this is one of the things that I said it is not for everyone. This manga was done in the 70s. In the 70s, I'd say the manga market was not the one we have nowadays. And that being said, everything is drawn by hand and by one guy alone. And again, it is drawn by hand. So the scenarios, the backgrounds, the whole thing is drawn by hand. And it is a stylistic trip to see the vistas that this guy can bring up with just the Nanking pen. It is nice. It is just nice. But I will say some people will not like it. But it is pretty nice in my opinion. And I think with that's it. So I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you for listening. Thank you for dealing with my ramblings, and I hope to see you again. As always, please like, please follow, please subscribe, share, depending on the platform you're in. Please join the Discord if you like what I do, and I hope to see you again the next time. I hope you stick around. Bye.